Hello, it's me, Christine. Welcome to my little crime corner. When I say grandma, what comes to mind? Do you picture your own grandma? What is she doing? Is she cooking? Is she doing a crossword puzzle? Is she knitting, like a TV grandma? I'm sure whatever she's doing, it is the opposite of something criminal. Hopefully. Today, we're meeting a grandma named Doris Payne. But she wasn't always a grandma, obviously. She was once a very young person, which, like same. Doris Payne was born and raised in Slab Fork, West Virginia, and was the youngest of 6 children. From a very young age, she witnessed her father being abusive towards her mother and felt very protective of her. It was during these instances that Doris had decided that she would have to be the one to take care of herself, since she felt she couldn't rely on anyone. It was sooner than later that things for her were about to change. She was sent one day to the local general store by her mother to settle a bill she had with the store. Doris got to talking with the store's owner about how her mother had told her that if she kept her grades up and continued to get straight A's, that her mother would buy her a watch. The store's owner was like, "Oh, that's so nice. Let me show you some of the watches that we have here." He proceeded to take a tray of watches out of the case and help Doris try on several. At the time, Doris was the only one in the store, and she recalls how friendly the owner was and how she really liked the attention she received, and remembers how well she was treated. However, just a few minutes later, another man had come into the store, and the shop owner's demeanor immediately changed. He started rushing Doris out of the store so fast, he had forgotten that she still had a watch on. Upset, Doris was standing in the doorway, pretty annoyed about what had just happened, and thought, "Hey, he pushed me out of the store. I'm not going to give him his watch back." But after a few moments, she had second thoughts and walked back up to the counter and placed the watch on it, telling the owner that he had forgotten it. It was at that point that Doris had gotten an idea. It would have been so easy for her to just walk out with this watch, and the owner never would have noticed. She figured that if she went into another store, she would be able to do this again, only this time it would be done intentionally. When she was 16, she and one of her friends would often take a 3-hour bus ride to Cleveland to practice stealing watches from department stores there. A few years later, Doris found herself in a tough situation. She was a single mom of 2 small children, and she felt she had no other options. It was possibly witnessing her parents' unhappy marriage that she decided to never get married herself. She was working as a nurse at a local hospital in Cleveland, and with her single income, she was having a hard time making ends meet. Doris had to make a change and do something drastic. Doris remembered the high she would get when she stole watches and jewelry from department stores as a teen. I guess you could say she missed it. Doris studied fashion magazines and, in a way, reinvented herself. Once she felt she had the right look, she was ready to put her plan into action. She would walk into a jewelry store and listen to how the employees talked about and described the gems, and watch how the prospective customers reacted and responded. She was confident that she could pull this off. She pulled off her first successful score in 1952 when she was 23 years old. She made her way to a jewelry store in Pittsburgh and talked up the employees. She was personable and likable, but still felt like the employees were looking at her in a suspicious way. She asked to look at several pieces of jewelry in the displays. She would take them out of the tray, try them on, and put them back. When she felt the time was right, she excused herself and said goodbye to the staff. She walked out and didn't look back as she held in her hand a $20,000 diamond ring. For the rest of the day, she felt incredibly paranoid and ended up spending the night in a bathroom stall at the bus station. She felt like someone was following her and couldn't settle her nerves. She decided to go back to the jewelry store the next day to return the ring. But as she got to the street, she had second thoughts. She felt bad, but not that bad, instead walking into a resale store and selling them the ring for $7,000. In 1957, she began a relationship with an Israeli man named Harold Bronfield, but she knew him as Babe. He was well connected in the Cleveland crime circuit and would often help out Doris when she got into legal trouble. When Doris was identified as a culprit in a Philadelphia jewelry store robbery, Harold handled it and somehow talked the judge into exchanging a guilty plea for no jail time. This worked for them for a while, but when pictures of Doris began popping up in newspapers, this made her rethink her game. She could no longer pull off these thefts in larger cities, as she had a greater chance of being recognized. She then shifted her focus to smaller cities, where she thought she had a better chance of flying under the radar. This all hit the wall when Harold passed away in 1968 due to complications from a cosmetic surgery. Not having Harold around for protection, Doris yet again had to make a change. In the early 70s, Doris felt she had hit her peak in the United States and decided to make the move to Europe. No one knew her there, and it was a fresh start, if you will. She felt now was the time, as her children were living with their father, and she found herself alone. She could now put all her focus into these robberies. So, in 1974, she booked a trip to Monte Carlo. She walked into a jewelry store and immediately began chatting up an employee. She had a relaxed and confident demeanor and asked to see several pieces in the displays and talked about how she was looking for just the right piece, as she had a very particular taste. She spent a fair amount of time in the store, and other customers did come in, which required the salesperson's attention. He excused himself, and Doris happily waited with the tray of rings that he had just pulled out for her. She tried on several, holding them up to the light and comparing the gemstones. Glancing back and forth, the salesperson noticed Doris trying on a ring, looking at it for a few seconds, then putting it back in the tray, picking up another one, checking this one out, and putting it back in the tray. This continued for a while until she was ready to make her move. She had a ring in her hand. She picked up her gloves and purse, waved goodbye to the salesperson, and calmly walked out of the store. She got into a waiting taxi by the curb, and as it pulled away from the store, she opened her palm and looked at the stolen ring. As she was looking at it and holding it up to the light, she realized this ring was probably the most extravagant one on the tray and knew that someone would soon be looking for it. She then made her way to the airport, and when she saw that there were no cops waiting there for her, she breathed a sigh of relief. Once at the airport, she walked to the ticket counter and bought a ticket for the first flight out of the country, a one-way ticket to Geneva, Switzerland. She sat down at her gate and waited and waited and waited. She felt that sooner or later, someone would have realized that she had taken the ring, and this would all be over for her. Her suspicions were right, and an officer approached her at her gate. She was then taken into custody and brought to the police station to be questioned. While at the police station, Doris had been searched several times in search of the ring, but they never found it. She meticulously moved it from place to place, making it appear as though she didn't have it. Doris was then transferred to a jail cell where she was visited daily by guards, all looking for this ring, and still they found nothing. This grew tiresome, and she considered throwing the ring away or just giving it to the guards, just so this could all be over and done with. Her lawyer advised against this, saying it wouldn't make a difference. She decided to keep it, but now she needed a more permanent place to hide it. She had asked the guards for a pair of nail clippers and was eventually able to pry the diamond off from its setting and got a needle and some thread and ended up sewing the diamond into the hem of her clothes. After several months in the prison, Doris and another inmate were taken to a clinic for an exam, and while there, she began scoping the place out, looking for an escape. While in the waiting room, she asked a passing nurse to use the bathroom. She calmly walked down the hall and kept checking the door, and once she saw the guard who had escorted her to the clinic turn his back, she turned down the other end of the hall and continued walking, not stopping until she was outside. Doris spotted a man who was leaving the clinic and walking to his car. She walked up to him, began chatting him up, and asked him for a ride. The man was like, "Sure, hop in." He acted more than happy to give her a ride. He ended up driving her all the way to Belgium, where she was able to obtain a new passport. After she got her paperwork in order, she made her way to London. She used her charm and personality to talk her way into high society parties, where she easily made lots of friends and connections. Hanging around these people gave her credibility in these circles. Doris would frequently go shopping with her new friends, and they would go into jewelry stores close to closing time, and she would make sure that the salespeople would see her with her friends, thus establishing her social status. After having been seen with her affluent friends, she went into these stores alone and was treated very well and respected by the staff. Every time she went in a store, she always greeted the staff and would make conversation with them. She would ask to see small pieces of jewelry, like rings and earrings, and would spend a great deal of time talking about the rings and their gem quality, basically talking their ear off. She'd put on a ring, look at it for a minute, take it off, put it back, pick up another ring, try that one on, look at it for a minute, put it back, and go for another after another. Eventually, she had one on her finger, left it on, and excused herself, saying she had to go find her husband or her friend she came in with, and instead just walked right out of the store. She did this over and over again and never raised suspicion. She kind of flew under the radar since she never sold the jewelry she stole in the same place. She would steal several pieces of jewelry in Europe and fly back and forth to the United States and sold them there. When she packed for her flight, she would always hide the pieces in plain sight, somewhere like a pill container. She was able to keep this up for some time, making big scores in one place and selling the jewelry in another, all while going unnoticed by salespeople and police alike. This lucky streak was about to come to an end. In 1980, just after her 50th birthday, Doris flew to Zurich and was having a fun night out at a club. This was certainly out of character for her, as it broke her first rule, which was no alcohol. She was planning on hitting a few stores and would need to be lucid to do so. She had a little too much to drink and was drifting in and out of consciousness and had fuzzy memories of wandering into a jewelry store and looking at Rolexes. She ended up back at the club, dancing for the rest of the night until she was swarmed by police at coat check when she was making her way out. The police then put her on a train bound for the embassy in French Switzerland. At one point during the night, Doris said she had to go to the bathroom and got up from her seat, walked down the narrow hallway, and jumped from the train at one of the stops. She wandered through a cornfield in the middle of the night until she came upon a road where she was eventually able to find a taxi. After sliding in, she asked the driver to take her to a hotel in Zurich. As she drifted in and out of sleep, she found a Rolex in her pocket with no memory of taking it or how it got there. She thought to herself, maybe I'm too old for this. But we all know she's not. She is still very much young. In 1982, Doris was again arrested for stealing stolen goods in Texas, in particular, a $32,000 3-carat diamond ring. We know this wasn't the first time she would have been arrested, and it certainly wouldn't be her last. Even though she continued to be caught, she never stayed in jail for very long. She always had an escape plan. While waiting in her jail cell one night, she got a guard's attention and complained about severe stomach pain. The pain was going on all night, and Doris was eventually taken to a local hospital to spend the night and get treatment. Because she was currently in police custody, she was watched every second. At one point during a shift change, a hospital volunteer stood guard while the staff rearranged. Doris chatted up the volunteer and somehow convinced her to step away for a second, to go get her something, or to go check something. She somehow was able to get her to turn away. The second she walked out of the door, Doris sprang up and calmly walked the other way down the hall. She remained on the run for 5 years before being caught up with again. In 1987, the FBI found her, and she was once again put in jail, this time for 6 years. As she reached her 60th birthday, she was released. The authorities felt that at her age, she probably didn't have it in her to remain on the run during crime spree after crime spree. Boy oh boy, were they wrong. In 1998, she found herself in Denver, Colorado. When Doris walked into a jewelry store, her look and personality left no question. She looked the part, she spoke the part, and the salespeople had no reason to suspect anything suspicious. She asked one of the employees to see a few of the pieces in the case, as she said she was interested in buying a matching bracelet and a ring. He showed her several rings, and she tried all of them on. She did her same routine of putting one on, holding it up to the light, looking at it for a second, taking it off, putting it back in the tray, picking up another one, rinse and repeat. As she took them off and placed them back in the tray on the counter, the salesman continued pulling out other pieces. Doris knew that many stores had rules that didn't allow them to take out a bunch of pieces at once while showing them to a potential customer. This store rule was backed up by their insurance company, who felt that this rule would lead to less thefts and general loss. The salesman ignored this rule, thinking Doris was very affluent and intent on purchasing. He had no reason to believe otherwise, as she had played the part so well. Doris spent more than half an hour trying on rings and bracelets with the salesman, and eventually had to call it quits, saying she just couldn't decide what to get. He then handed her a business card and said he was looking forward to seeing her again soon, since she promised to return later that evening with her husband. Another employee had approached the salesman and asked if the woman who was just in here ended up buying anything. He said no, she couldn't decide, but she was going to come back later with her husband. As he was putting all the bracelets and rings back in the display, he noticed one appeared to be missing. He started looking around, thinking that he might have dropped one, or it might have accidentally made its way into another display. The missing ring in question was quite a large one. It was 3 emerald-cut diamonds in a platinum setting, weighing in at more than 5 carats, and valued at over $57,000. After searching all over with no avail, they came to the conclusion that the woman who was in here earlier must have stolen it. The salesman then called the police, and once there, they dusted the display cases for prints. They didn't find any, as Doris was extremely careful not to touch anything, as she made a point to never touch anything for her prints to stick to. She knew what she was doing and made an effort to never leave any physical evidence behind. Since they came up with no prints, police were hopeful that the salespeople would have gotten a good enough look at her in order to give them an accurate description. After describing her the very best they could, police got in contact with a Denver detective, and once she heard the description and the details of the crime, she had a pretty good idea of who they were dealing with. The detective, a woman named Gail Riddell, thought the culprit sounded very familiar to a suspect the department had received a bulletin for several months ago from the Jeweler Security Alliance. She decided to go through her files, and she pulled out the note, and sure enough, the description and method of operation was a perfect match. This woman must have been Doris Payne. Gail knew that based on the ring she stole and her history of jewelry thefts, Doris would likely be trying to move this ring quickly, and she would have surely been out of town by now. Gail knew that she had to work quickly if she wanted any chance of catching Doris. She immediately sent out a notice to be on the lookout for a woman trying to sell this ring, as well as Doris's description and method of thefts. She was good at what she did, and there was no doubt in Gail's mind that she was days away from pulling off another seamless theft. In addition to notifying all the local jewelry stores in the area, police were then sent to airports in an effort to warn airport employees and to seek any signs of her. After showing her picture to airport employees and gate agents, no one had any recollection of seeing her. The police believed that she was still in town, about to strike again. Gail then sought a court order for an arrest warrant for Doris, and a judge readily granted it. Once caught, Doris's bail would have been set at $1 million. After no trace of Doris on their radar, the Denver Police Department got in contact with the FBI for help. The FBI division in Cleveland, Ohio took the lead, as Doris's last known address was a home in Cleveland. Agents quickly went to the home and searched for Doris. However, she wasn't there, and it was apparent that she hadn't been there for quite some time. While searching through the kitchen, one of the agents opened the drawer at the bottom of the fridge and found $10,000 in cash. They figured that if she had hidden money in the fridge, she probably had lots of other hiding places all over her house. The search continued. A box was found in another room containing several passports, and the agents knew that she was already gone, and she could have literally been anywhere. It seemed just as police were on her tail, Doris was 10 steps ahead. They needed to move quicker if they wanted any remote chance of catching her. As the days passed, it looked like they had lost her once again and wouldn't be able to find her. However, just 1 month later, the FBI got a break. The owner of a pawn shop in Cleveland got a hold of the police, saying that he recognized the stolen ring. When presented with a picture of it, the shop owner confirmed that yes, he had seen this ring, and that somebody had already purchased it. He then gave the purchaser's information to the police, and they paid him a visit. When the agents asked the man about the ring, he willingly showed it to them, and they confirmed that it was in fact the stolen ring. They may have recovered the jewelry, but where was Doris? It wasn't until September 1998 that Doris made her next move. Several hundred miles away in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, Doris walked into another jewelry store and was her typical confident self. The salesperson, however, was already aware of exactly who she was. But she played it cool, not letting on, and began showing Doris the pieces she was interested in. A few minutes later, she excused herself and called security. Doris was once again in police custody. Gail received a call shortly after Doris was booked, and she adamantly said, "Do not give her a bond." Remember, with the court order, Gail had bond for Doris set at $1 million. There was a pause on the other end of the King of Prussia Police Department line, like, $1 million? You know this is a frail old lady, right? $1 million. And Gail was like, "You don't know who you're dealing with. Bail is $1 million. She could not risk her getting away again. When Gail finally got Doris into her interrogation room, she asked, "How did you do it?" Doris actually smiled and said, "You know, you're the first person to ask me that." She then went on to explain that the character she had built and cultivated over all these years was her seamless way in and out, and how the way she spoke, dressed, and acted allowed her to walk into any jewelry store and get the unsuspecting salespeople to give her what she wanted. She knew what to do, and at the right time, she was somehow always able to slip away, aside from this last time, of course. But her crime spree didn't end here. In 2000, she was arrested again for grand larceny and was released in 2004. On January 22, 2010, Doris was once again arrested, this time in Costa Mesa, California at a Saks, for taking the tags off a coat and wearing it out of the store. She must have missed her jewelry lifting days because on October 29, 2013, she was arrested on felony grand larceny charges for stealing a diamond ring at a Palm Desert, California jewelry store, which was worth more than $22,000. During her trial for this, she had pled guilty and was sentenced to 2 years in prison and 2 more years of parole upon her release. The judge also ordered her to stay away from jewelry stores. Doris ended up only serving 3 months of her 2-year sentence and was released due to prison overcrowding. She must have thought that the judge's orders to stay away from jewelry stores was a suggestion, because on October 23, 2015, Doris was again arrested and charged with shoplifting at another Saks, this time in Georgia, after store security footage showed her putting a pair of Dior earrings in her pocket and quickly exiting the store. There was an instance a few months earlier on July 11, 2015, at a North Carolina jewelry store where Doris reportedly visited, and when she left, employees allegedly realized that a $33,000 diamond ring was missing from its case. As far as I was able to tell, there was no security footage to serve as evidence in this particular instance, and no one actually saw her taking it. It was just realized to be gone after she left. Coincidence? There were never any notices filed by police, but a local news station had gotten a hold of an email that was circulating around to local jewelry stores all over the area, which described the alleged theft, and to alert those stores to keep a closer eye on the customers. This must have prompted police to take action because by August, a warrant was issued for Doris's arrest, but I don't believe she was ever booked or charged for this instance. Doris was arrested in Atlanta, Georgia on December 13th, 2016 for grand larceny charges, And once again, on July 17th, 2017, for reportedly stealing $86 worth of products from a Walmart, with which she was caught in the parking lot. She was caught as she was still wearing an ankle monitor from her arrest the previous year. Currently, Doris is in her 90s and living as a free woman. Are her days of diamond theft over? Only time will tell. Because based on everything we've talked about today, I honestly don't know. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. She is still very much young.